everybody. This is Michelle.
And this is Julie, but I don't have my 2-pack a day voice going on here, Michelle.
I know. I'm not sure what happened here with my voice. I sound terrible, but I really feel fine.
I know. Yeah. Well, obviously we're sitting in the same room here right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not putting on a mask or anything, so we're good.
Yeah.
Well, we have an episode here today. I think we should just dive right in. We're really excited to have a guest on here to talk to us about her experience and time with the cannabis industry and the process that she had gone through. So welcome, Jessica. Thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you, ladies, for having me.
Yeah. So we just kind of wanted to get started with maybe a little bit of background. Just you could give us an idea of where you got started and how you became immersed in this particular industry.
You bet. So my background, I started with really traditional biotech jobs. And so I worked in the biotech industry on kind of around human genetics and the Human Genome Project and things. And long story short is I got sick and used some medical cannabis while I was biding time for a clinical trial.
Okay.
And it helped pretty well with weight management. So it helped me put on a little bit of weight, which I desperately needed at that time. And I was involved in a biotech that was a spin out of Harvard. We built a DNA sequencer, and that company got sold right about the time that legalization occurred in the state of Washington. It was looking for kind of the next company to found and decided that somebody needed to do kind of an ag bioplay in this space and really kind of look at how can you make products that are consistent for people.
Right. You had mentioned in some of the notes we were looking at that it was legal to grow and sell to consumers in Washington around this time frame, but research wasn't legal? Or there wasn't legislation. Can you share a little more about that? I was really surprised I figured the cart would come before the horse, but apparently not.
No, in fact, the cart in most senses is really behind this horse right now. So for example, in the state of Washington, when they legalized 10 years ago, we signed up for essentially a growing license. And one of the contingencies on that was we had to grow to either destroy or sell. And we said we wanted to do research, and they denied our license. So they told us, hey, you need to write new legislation. I am a science major that didn't know the difference between the House and the Senate. So they said, call these two senators. There's a Democrat and a Republican, and hopefully they will both help you. And so we drafted new legislation, and now we were granted the first cannabis research license granted by the state about 6 years ago.
And did you have any trouble finding legislators that would listen and help you, or was that something that you were able to obtain right off the bat?
We were pretty lucky. So we had Senator Ann Rivers on the Republican side, and then Senator Jeannie Cole Wells on the Democrat side. Okay. And, research is kind of one of those things that our argument was essentially like, it doesn't matter if you think that the plant's great or you think it's horrible, research is going to provide those answers. And so it was relatively easy. We had the first set of legislation that unanimously passed the House on cannabis.
Wow.
But then we hit the governor's office and it was vetoed for reasons outside of anything we were doing. So we had to kind of restart. And so it took us 3 years to get the legislation passed.
Would you say that this is kind of more of a political topic that you ran across, the politics surrounding people not really having any understanding of what the plant does and, what we were trying to learn from it? Or was it just there was something else that was more important for them to pass?
I think the issue really honestly was that there was some budgetary concerns that were outside of anything that we were doing that led to the veto. It did take quite a while, though, for example, to figure out who would actually oversee our license, because we're not really growing to sell to consumers. We're growing for research, which takes a different set of regulations. So that took a little bit of time. And we also ran into a little bit of issue because we grow both plants that produce THC and plants that don't. Okay. And so on the hemp side, if it doesn't produce THC, it can't be grown in the same facility as plants that produce THC.
Okay.
Which was kind of strange. So we ran into a lot of hurdles around.
Why? Can I ask why that is?
Did they look the same? Did the plants look the same?
Exactly. They look 100% the same. And I think that's why there's an issue. So
Got it.
Hemp is legal at a federal level. And so we're the Department of Agriculture oversees us on that level.
Okay.
And then on the other side, it's not federally legal. So it's a state agency that oversees us. So they're just kind of different bodies. And I guess, like kind of separation of church and state kind of thing. They just said, if it doesn't produce THC, you got to grow it in a different facility. So we had to open up a separate company, separate everything.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They look exactly the same.
And so that was the growth of that was for the CBD? Was the CBD component? Okay.
Yeah. So hemp will produce other compounds so I guess stepping back, THC is kind of the plant that everybody knows cannabis for. It's
right.
The compound that makes people kind of feel high. It's the euphoric compound in the plant. But there's plants that don't make that or make very low levels of that. And those are hemp.
Okay. I have so many questions. I'm just,
Back away. People have a lot of questions around this. It's kind of in the 1940s, our grandparents kind of set us with this crazy legislation that separated them. And
sometimes it seems like when people don't have the information, they don't know, they just shut things down, or they perceive it as bad, or they think about it as something that the hippies did in the 70s, kind of a thing. And so that's what people have always thought. So I think that would, I was wondering how much resistance you would have to even the research on it because of the misinformation and some of the stigma around it.
We get a decent amount of that, and especially on the hemp side, where all of our hemp products. So we have a hemp company, Basic Jane, and all of our hemp products are intentionally THC free. Okay. But we still really run into a lot of confusion around hemp and whether or not those products can make you high. And so there is a lot of stigma around this plant. And I think depending on where you live in the country, very different stigma.
Right.
Here in Washington State, I think most people probably think of the plants that produce THC as pretty analogous to buying liquor, because we have stores and it's been 10 years and all that. But if you step back and you go to other parts of the country, it's definitely not that way. So even depending on where you are, there's different stigma around.
Right. Yeah, we have dispensaries on practically every corner, it seems, these days.
Just like coffee.
Yeah, just like coffee.
And I think most Washington residents kind of forget it's not that way everywhere in the U.S.
I know. It's definitely something that we're really accustomed to seeing now, but, definitely not in other places. And
vice versa. I remember when Rick, my boyfriend, started coming, when he would visit here and it was legal, he'd be like, so we could just go to the store right now. I'm like, yeah, we sure can.
Yeah. It's kind of funny.
The other thing that people don't catch on is our state makes $750 million in tax revenue off of it. So,
for that reason alone, I was surprised that there'd be, resistance, because there's such a tax base that's really dependent on the sale of this now after 10 years, for sure.
Pretty crazy. In fact, there's been several states that in the last couple of years have legalized just based upon those numbers. It's very easy. People adopt sin taxes a lot better than property tax hikes.
They're kind of like, well, whatever works, if this is what I want. Yeah. So
if an adult wants to use that, we'll get some money off them.
Why not? It comes off of soda pop, and it comes off of cigarettes.
Everything.
And, everything these days. So
all these sin taxes.
Yeah. So your research, you were able to get the research information going, and you have the federal and state level guidance, it sounds like, or they're overseers of what was happening with the research that you were doing. But it sure took a long time, it sounds like 3-4 years to get to get everything passed the way you needed it to be.
It really did. And it's kind of also in constant flux. I think until we kind of see on the hemp side for the plants that don't produce high levels of THC, that's pretty stable. We know how to grow those. We grow those fairly high scale, 100,000, 200,000 plants kind of situation.
Wow.
But on plants that produce THC, cannabis or marijuana plants, that's a completely different story. And I think that we'll continue to see flux on that legislation for probably, until kind of federal guidance comes out, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I would imagine too.
Do you think that'll be a while? What's your gauge on that?
Every kind of presidential election cycle, there's the rumor mill starts back up on whether or not it's going to change. A lot of people don't realize that the president could actually change it potentially. The Senate could change it. There's different ways that it could be changed. I think that, one of the things is that there's a banking, something called the Safe Banking Act that would allow credit card transactions and things to occur in our stores.
Okay.
Our stores are all cash right now.
Which is kind of dangerous. That leads to a whole other set of problems.
Hugely dangerous. Yeah. And, that couldn't have been passed, the Safe Banking Act, Congress. So I don't really know. I think everybody will be surprised when it does occur, but we're in a situation that there's only a dozen states that don't have some formal legalization of this.
Right. That wildfire spread pretty fast once the West Coast kind of got started on it. I remember that you started seeing, it's like Oregon, or I think it was Washington.
Washington, California, Oregon. Yeah.
Yeah. You started seeing all that happen there, and some of the little bit more conservative states. I think it took a little bit more time, to get going on that.
It did. And then states like Michigan saw that tax base and, started to jump on board. So it's spread.
Well, and it's kind of crazy that it's that kind of motivation as opposed to back to what you started out with in the research that you do and all the beneficial things that there are to offer from this plant. It's just kind of crazy that it wouldn't be everywhere already.
It's the almighty buck. Michelle.
I know.
The almighty buck got it moving. We'll just take it.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy because the compounds are pretty unique. And what we do is we selectively breed for these compounds that have medicinal capabilities. So, for example, one that we're pretty interested in and we've bred for is something called THCV. So it's got a V at the end of that THC. And it's actually an appetite suppressant that doesn't make you high. So we're pretty interested in that. People.
Yeah, that's kind of contrary to what THC will do for you.
Yeah.
100%.
I know. Sign me up. Sign me up.
That is often the comment we get on that compound.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I'm just so curious. So you're saying that you're researching cannabis, but how are you? Okay, this may be a real fundamental question coming from someone who doesn't do what you do, but it's like, how do you create seeds? Like, how do you create all of these things to make do you have to how do you create them? I guess that's what it comes down to.
We have plants growing, a decent amount of plants, and what we do is we have some analytical chemistry equipment that we use, and it allows us to look at what the plants produce. So remember I said the plants fairly look the same. Like if you look at a plant, we can't say, hey, that plant's going to make THC or it's going to make CBD. We have to actually analyze what the plant makes. And we have some equipment. It's fairly expensive equipment, about $150,000 for the equipment. And it essentially just tells us what the compounds are in the plant. And what we'll do is we'll take plants that produce things that we're interested in, and then we breed them with other plants that produce the same thing. So kind of think of it like if you wanted a redheaded child, the best way to get a redheaded child is to use two redheaded parents kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do a lot of. So right now we probably have, I don't know, about 400 plants going, and those plants represent about 300 different things.
Like varieties or different strains?
Yeah. So we exactly. And we actually number our plants. So VB25 is happy, horny, not hungry, for example.
Who gets to pick the names? That's what I want to know. Who gets to pick the names?
Not me. I'm like creatively challenged. So other people internally get to do that.
Okay.
It's one of those things that a lot of people don't realize that there's actually like zero regulation on what you call it.
Yeah, I imagine.
If you go to a store and want to buy like Bubba Kush, it might not really be Bubba Kush.
I know they have an Obama Kush. I've seen that one out there. I thought that was kind of funny. Obama Kush. Yeah. I think it's a blend or hybrid or whatever, but I'm saying I know too much, right, Michelle? Apparently I do. Apparently they know me up at Dockside. So how many strains? I mean, so I guess you could say then strains are kind of unlimited. You could have, hundreds of different strains?
Yeah. So in our lab, for example, we've done several hundred crosses alone. In each cross, we get, anywhere from hundreds to 500,000 seeds, kind of depending on the scale that we do it on.
Okay.
So, at the end of the day, our goal is to produce plants that produce stable seed so you can put it in the ground and it will always give you the same profile. And that is not necessarily an easy thing to do.
No,
so,
I can't imagine it would be.
Yeah, it requires a lot of breeding and a lot of testing.
So with the seeds, like let's say you did it on a larger scale, are you able to store the seeds, or do they have to be planted right away?
We can store them for a fairly long amount of time, depending on how they're stored.
Okay.
So, depending on how they're stored, they can last probably a decade or two.
Oh, goodness.
But if they're not stored well, it can be a fairly short life.
Okay. Just curious. Mm-hmm. So,
if you find some seeds in somebody's refrigerator or anything, like, we might be able to bring them back if they're, from your grandpa or whatever. We get a lot of people calling us about that.
Really? Uh-huh. Oh, that's interesting.
Grandpa's Own Strain. That's the name of that one.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Grandpa's Own Strain. So you obviously sound like you found quite a few differences, and you ultimately, did you find something that was able to help you out of what you were, because I imagine you were probably targeting a lot of what you were doing toward, the benefits, like for pain or for nausea, or, I don't know, sleep, if you weren't feeling well. Is that where you were kind of focusing your attention?
So my issue was really weight management, and it turns out that THC is really good for weight management. Like, it's hard to consume THC without, like, being able to keep your weight on.
Yeah.
But one of the issues that, like, facilitated us starting this company was a family friend who had pretty bad cancer, and she had found really good pain relief with a specific vape cartridge that she had gotten at a dispensary. This is 10 years ago, 12 years ago or so. Long story short is, when she went back to buy it again, it didn't work, and it was really pretty devastating for her, because she had been in so much pain, and she had actually been able to kind of go and socialize and see her grandkids and, do the things that she wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then when she couldn't get a reproducible supply of that, it was really pretty devastating to her.
Oh, I imagine.
So
she's probably trying to find other options, huh?
Other options and things. And so our goal is to really make consistent products. And so we've targeted, I would say, about a dozen compounds, and they range from anything from, like, the weight management, like I told you, to compounds that may help with pain, digestion, sleep. Okay. Sleep is actually probably most likely just generated from old weed. So THC breaks down into something called CBN, and that helps people sleep. So,
so you can use all this stuff that is past its expiration. Does it even have an expiration? Does this stuff have an expiration?
So what ends up happening is, over time, like, the cannabinoids, what we think look for, degrade some. But the biggest thing, I think, is like, food products. So, like the sugars and things. So if you buy chocolate or something like that in a store, it's most likely the chocolate will go bad before the cannabinoids.
Right. Okay.
But if you have, like, old flour or something, that probably is degrading it down to, like, the sleep compound that people like for sleep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So CBN
is the sleep one people like.
Oh, CD
DN.
as in
C is in boy, N is in Nancy.
Got it. Okay. CBN.
Cat, boy, Nancy.
Got it. So you had one of the questions here was, when you started kind of going through and doing the research and everything on this, was there anyone that you had difficulty, like, in your life explaining about your company or what you were trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the hardest conversations for me was my grandpa.
Really?
I just really thought that his response was going to be super prohibitionist, kind of, what are you doing kind of situation. But it really was quite the opposite. He was almost in his 90s when I talked to him, and he's pretty cute about it. So I had an uncle that had died of cancer, and he said, who do you think helped Jim, my uncle? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, I was the one that went and got him weed to help him.
Oh.
He goes, you go get him, girl. So
I love that.
Yeah. So I was very nervous that, he would think that he wouldn't understand why we were doing it.
He was a lot more progressive than you gave him credit for, it sounds like.
Oh, he was really progressive.
Yeah.
Super progressive.
So
that's awesome.
So do you have a store that's in the Seattle area, or do you have a couple different stores?
So what we do is we have we only sell THC-free products. So we have only hemp products on the market right now.
Okay.
And those products are available at a lot of local outlets like grocery stores and things like that. But then they're also available at basicjane.com.
Oh, okay. So you can get, because all of that can be shipped. There's no problem with that.
It's all shipped everywhere. And we intentionally formulate THC-free. We know people may like THC, no judgment, but the products we're formulating right now are all.
So someone told me that there had to be at least a tiny bit of THC in there on the CBD products.
Okay, so there's a couple things. So stepping back, if you go and buy in a store in the state of Washington, like a dispensary type, those are required by law to contain THC.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird, but
that is a little weird.
It has to do with like the tax law behind it.
Of course it does.
Right?
Of course it does.
Yeah. And so, they only want people to sell THC products, so there's excise tax on everything that goes to the stores. But then when you purchase like hemp products, there's different types of hemp products out there. So this is really important for people. So if you just use something that's just made out of what they call full spectrum hemp when you grow it has small amounts of THC in it. So if you're using a product that's using the full hemp plant, then there will be THC in there. And some products, depending on how they're concentrated, can have a fair amount of THC in it. We decided quite a while ago that we wanted to consistently formulate and that would require us to remove the THC. So we actually removed the THC from our product.
That actually probably gives you a wider range in terms of marketing the product and selling the product too, because you can have it in a grocery store. You can have it
anywhere.
You can have it at 7-Eleven. Drugstore. Thank you.
Yeah, we do have it in a number of drugstores.
Yeah.
And the reality is that the products were formulated for my co-founder's mom, who had really bad arthritis in her knees. And she was a little bit older, and we were a little bit concerned that THC may cause some fall issues and things. And so when we first began formulating, we actually formulated with THC and without, and didn't see, for kind of pain relief of like joints and muscles and things, we didn't see any differences and how people responded. So we decided, it's just a lot simpler, and we can target people that may have a job that they're not allowed to consume THC, or maybe an athlete. There's a number of people that like THC consumption is a problem for. So
sure, yeah.
We targeted that market.
So if, like, say, for instance, someone had a job where they got tested, like they drive a truck, or, they have something, like that. If they were tested and they're taking like a straight up CBD product, it wouldn't test positive for anything.
Yeah. So it depends on what the manufacturer is using.
Okay.
So if they're using something called CBD isolate, then the person will not. But if they're using like a full spectrum hemp oil, there's a high probability that they will if they take enough of the product.
That's good to know.
So you really have to make sure you buy THC free if that is a concern for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and the grocery stores are all, like you were saying, they're going to be all THC free. I just didn't know if it was something that, and so here's my thought process without having the education behind it is I just thought that like the ones that are at the dispensary are going to be better because they would have that little base of THC. So I got those little, the creams or whatever for my mom's like arm or her elbow or whatever. And I got the ones that had the THC in them, but it was just a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was going on her skin, so it wasn't going to hurt her.
Does your mom know? Does your mom know?
No, she didn't know.
You got to switch over. Okay, I'm going to plug. You got to pitch over to Basic Jane because it's going to work really well for her.
Oh, yeah.
I'm excited to try something.
I'm going to totally try that,
this Basic Jane. And we're going to have to put that up on our page too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, basicjane.com.
A couple things that I'll tell you is one is when you look at these products, so the first thing is that the products in the grocery store can have THC in them. They can have, if as long as they're manufactured from hemp, which can have some THC in it. So people do have to really
it has to say it on the packaging.
It has to say on it like no THC, or people will label it. So if that is a concern for you, just don't, warning that grocery store hemp can have THC.
Okay.
Depending on how somebody manufactures it.
Okay.
But then the second thing is when we look at, hey, does a product work? It, like on a cream, for example, your skin's a really good barrier at keeping things out of it. So one of the biggest things we had to figure out is like, how do you get the CBD across the skin so that it works? And we found that it didn't need THC if it was formulated right. So it kind of depends on what people need.
Okay.
I guess.
Well, I know it really works. I mean, it definitely helps, It's, and it's, it doesn't, I mean, these are things that go on your skin, like you said, so it's not, there's no worry about it, altering your mind or anything like that. So
do you have products for pets?
No, but I make one I have that cat that survived this like catastrophic fall of 11 stories.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was
wow.
Really scary. And he broke 3 legs.
Oh my gosh. Oh. He lived. That's crazy.
It was totally crazy. And he was only 11 months old. So the vet kept saying he'll be fine. Long story short is I make a little CBD product for him by myself. But I do think that it really does benefit pets quite a lot. I have a friend who runs a company, Austin and Cat, and they do really good pet treats. And I can tell you from my cat that fell, like he's totally recovered and every day wants his CBD. So.
Wow.
Well, for sure. I noticed I just lost my dog a couple months ago, and literally in the last 48 hours of his life, my son suggested, he's like, Mom, go get some CBD. And so I did, because he was in a lot of pain, and I could tell that the CBD helped him. Yeah. So anyway,
might be really helpful for my very, very busy puppy.
Slow him down a little bit.
Slow him down a little bit.
I think my friend makes one called like the Wiggles formula for that very reason.
Oh, okay. I'm writing that down.
Yeah. I think it's called the Wiggles or something like that.
So this is obviously very foreign to a lot of our listeners. And so the way you've explained it has been really helpful. If someone was in need of something, for example, to help with their sleep or to help with like the joint pain or things like that, how do you navigate the product selection? How would you suggest, someone who's not really familiar with this stuff navigate that?
Go about it.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would say is like figure out if you want to consume THC or not. And I think THC is a great molecule. I personally consume it, but not everybody does.
Right.
So if you want to consume THC, I would say like if you're in a state that has a legal market, that is like by far the best place to consume it. Anything that you're buying generally on the internet is going to be fairly lower quality, like buy at a store.
Okay.
So that's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is like start really low levels.
Okay.
So standard products are like 10 milligrams is great for a lot of consumers, but like start with a lower amount, start with 2 or 5 and kind of give it a little bit of time, a couple hours, see if it works for you.
Okay.
And, I would say also, this is a hard one because there's just not very good,
I know.
Customer data out there for people just because it's every state. There's not like a product you can say like, if you want to consume THC, go and buy this in every state. It's
different in every state. Yeah.
Right.
It's different in every state. And, oftentimes combining CBD with THC is, I think, oftentimes like higher levels of success for most people, not all people, but a lot of people.
Well, a lot of the products have both. I mean, it has both. Like if it's a THC product, it'll have maybe a higher concentration of CBD. One of my kids has CBD and it has a tiny bit, I think it has a tiny bit of THC in it, but it's an anxiety thing. I mean, they use it for anxiety and things like that. So kind of calming, I think.
100%. And the thing about CBD is it kind of, I tell people it's like, imagine it, like how THC works in your body is it's like a receptor. So it's like a lock and a key that the THC binds to a receptor. But what you end up with is CBD doesn't really bind to the receptor, but it's another key. So imagine if you have like multiple keys on a keychain, it's going to kind of slow things down. So what CBD does is it kind of tempers or slows down the high of THC.
Okay.
And so especially for anxiety and stuff, a lot of people find THC can increase anxiety. So tempering it with some CBD is oftentimes a good idea.
Yeah. I know. I think a lot of people have looked at least people that I know have looked at the THC product as a way to calm their anxiety. But it sounds to me like there's a very big possibility you can do that without experiencing the high aspect of it, with some of these other products that you're talking about. So they don't need to have, there's one person I can think of that he's been smoking it since he was probably 16 or 17 and he's almost 60. And it's like, people say you can't get addicted to this stuff, but I think you probably can because.
Oh, you definitely can.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, your body can get addicted to like a lot of things. You can get addicted to caffeine, sugar, there's a lot of things. And I think that one of the fallacies around cannabis out there is that it's impossible to get addicted to it.
Right.
And that's not true. It has lower addiction rates than alcohol and some of the other, sin taxes that we think of out there. But it does have, abuse.
Sure. Well, just like anything else, I suppose. If you think about, if you do a parallel to alcohol, it's like there really is no, in my mind, like parallel. We've got people driving drunk. We've got people with alcoholism problem. And all of that stuff's legal. So, there back in the day, it wasn't, and they did it underground. So that's kind of the progression, I think, of a lot of things that are going on here. But there's so much more science around everything to do with this. It's not about some stoner on the street in my mind, just getting high. There's so much more to it. And there's so many more benefits that people just really never have really known about.
Are there still medical specific facilities? Before it was legal, my son worked in a medical facility and he was not excited about the government coming in and, making things legal. He was not a fan of that. And as we're sitting here talking, I'm thinking, we have all the dispensaries and they're a dime a dozen. They're kind of all over the place. And I'm sitting here in my mind trying to think, are there medical facilities still?
I don't know
it depends. Yeah, it depends on what state you're in.
Okay.
So like, for example, Colorado still has both, but up here we only have one system and that one system is supposed to serve both. But the reality is the recreational market is probably 85%, if not closer to 90% of the consumers that walk through the door kind of situation. So medical up here in Washington has suffered, but there is a push, for example, to figure out if we can reboot it and maybe participate a little bit more with some of the universities and different things like that. If you look at certain states, like in the Midwest, they actually require universities to run their medical systems. So
I was going to say, I think it is unfortunate. This is kind of just coming to mind as I'm listening to this conversation. I just remember when he worked there and I personally learned so much about the cannabis plant that I never knew before. But those medical facilities where people could go and really learn and understand, and because that's all they did, and it was for the treatment of, for medical purposes.
Right.
And that's such a big proponent of what that plant does. But there's so much focus on the recreational. So I kind of see that.
Was it ever covered? It wasn't covered by insurance or anything with a medical. You just had to have a medical card to be able to get it, right?
Yeah, and in other countries, medical insurance has started to pick it up.
Okay.
So, hopefully at some point that becomes, how the United States is. But you're right in the sense that right now our market is predominantly THC and it's predominantly recreational. But when we look at all these compounds that the plant makes them for itself. It doesn't really make them for us humans. And those compounds are meant to help the plant fight infection, do stress effects and things like that. And a number of those things can actually help us a lot.
Right.
So we need to, at some point, transition from just high THC plants out there in the market. And I think that happens, but it is very hard for the stores to fight. They have to go where the business is.
Right.
And the business is recreational too.
Yeah. But it's kind of, even if it's recreational or if it's medical, it's not really a different product, right? It's just maybe the intensity of the product.
Well, I think it's a knowledge of knowing how to use it. Because I just think about myself. I'm not really, I don't I don't consume or smoke weed. But if I got some critical ailment, that the possibility was there of it helping me physically, where would I go to know? You walk into those recreational, I mean, I've been in one, and it's like, I don't even know what questions to ask, or if these people in there are qualified to answer medical,
Well, they're all stoned for
the
what?
medically, that's what everybody thinks. But do you know what I'm saying, Jessica? Like,
Yeah, it's a huge issue. And quite frankly, it's one we kind of grapple with as a company, because we think, is it worth doing something like this where it's a podcast where we just get on and essentially answer people's questions?
Yeah.
If you step back and you say, hey, for pain relief, example, for THC, let's say that you had bad pain with, some form of cancer or something that you wanted pain relief. There was a study up in Canada that was done that looked at pain relief, and they found that people need 1/10 of the dose of which they need to get high for pain relief. But most people consume cannabis until they feel it.
Right. Yeah.
And so if we step back and we say, how do we teach people to consume this plant, not necessarily until I feel something, high effect, and more analogous to a Tylenol or an Advil effect. I think there's a lot of education, and we struggle with how do we do that, and how do we introduce these other compounds to people that have completely different characteristics on them.
I remember my son, he told me, he was like, Mom, smoking it is the last recommendation typically for the patients. Because there's so many other ways of treating things.
Well, actually, that's a nice segue into a question I just had for you. What are your thoughts on edible products? Do you guys make edible products?
We make a CBD mint and a CBD-CBDA mint.
Okay.
Stepping back, the plant doesn't actually make THC or CBD. It makes the THCA or CBDA. And that's why you have to burn or cook THC.
Okay.
So that's where if you just went and ate THC, like if you went and bought flour in the store and ate it, chances are you would not get high, because it has to be burnt or cooked with in order to be activated. So I tell people this is analogous to, like, if you ate grapes, you're not going to get drunk.
Oh, that
but if
makes
you
sense.
ferment grapes, then you get drunk, right?
Right.
So you have to get the cannabis plant hot in order to have THC or CBD.
Okay.
So we make a product that's the raw form of CBD called CBDA, and it's actually pretty good for, like, your immune system, anti-inflammatory. It's kind of the raw supercharged version of CBD. So we make that, and then we make a CBD mint.
Okay.
But we don't make anything with THC or beyond that. We've done some partnerships with different medical communities in different states for some products, but we don't make any.
And those things like the CBD mint, is that to, obviously it doesn't get you high, but is that for pain, or is it for relaxation, or what would someone, or just because they like the taste of it, or what would somebody buy a CBD mint for?
They're peppermint. I don't know, like me, I'm sure there's other ways to get your peppermint. Yeah. People use them for a variety of applications. What we find people use them for the most are inflammation, stress relief, kind of, just a little bit of a taking the edge off of life scenario. Okay. And we also find a lot of people will take them at night. Okay. So I would say the biggest things are, if you think about the difference between a topical and an oral, is an oral will go like all through your entire body. Right. Where a systemic, like a topical is, if your knee hurts, you're going to rub it on your knee. But if your wrist hurts, rubbing cream on your knee isn't going to help your wrist. Exactly. And then we also make a patch, which is probably my favorite way for cannabinoids. It's a transdermal patch. Do you guys know about these?
Mm-hmm. No, I'm very curious. So is it something you just have on for a little while?
But before you tell us about the patch, I just got to tell all our listeners, Julie has the most notes I've ever seen her take during any episode right now.
It's just so interesting.
She's running out of
room. I need to know basicjane.com. What's the patch?
We got the CBDA, we got the patch. It's just
THCA, CBD. Yeah.
Okay. Anyways,
all good info. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, back to the patch.
It's funny because we do a decent number of like I would say Q&As with Rotary groups and things like that, they always start with, hey, there's only going to be like 5 minutes of questions. And I'm always like, no, people have a lot of questions about this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, trust me, there's always a follow-up.
Okay, so patch.
Okay, so the patches are pretty cool. So what they have is they generally have like a coenzyme Q or something that will allow them to actually get deeper into your bloodstream. So how our patches work is if you put them somewhere where there's decent veins, like your wrist or the top of your hands or foot or something, they'll actually work very systemically, similar to a oral product. If you put them somewhere that there's maybe a little bit more padding, like let's say your back hurt, you could put it on your back, and then it works very like in a decent localized fashion, but maybe a little higher octane than a cream, and it will release over 12 hours. So if your shoulder was really bad, you could put the patch on your shoulder and then go about your day, and it would release over 12 hours.
And this is all CBD.
This is all CBD, but you will find in certain markets, you will find THC patches as well.
Oh, I don't know how I feel about a THC patch. That sounds like it would be kind of
dangerous.
Well, it's kind of like I asked you about the edibles, because I feel like that's something that is so, I mean, I know it's regulated, but you just never know what you're going to get, right? I mean, you just never know.
Yes.
You could get something that, I don't know. Those make me a little nervous just seeing.
Well, and it's getting better with the testing labs. We've had a number kind of leave the market based on regulatory concerns, but it is really a little bit difficult to test those products. The reality is states generally do not regulate lab testing systems. These are usually like federally regulated. Okay. So it is the states are doing their best job getting these labs up and running. But when you have an edible, the things that I tell people is start with less than you think you want. Okay. And give it, generally will take an hour or two to hit you like full steam. Like,
and that's when people say nothing's happening, so they take another one.
They take another, and then another, and then they end up with was it Maureen Dowd or whoever Washington Post that had they're
like a zombie or something after that. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that people should consume less of an edible than they think they may want, and I think they'll have a better experience. And if you find a product line that you like, stick with that, because they generally go to the same lab, so their products generally are fairly consistent. But you're right, if you have gummies from one company one week and then chocolate from another company another week, you may have a very different
So
reaction.
consistency is something to consider.
So going back to that patch, so is the patch something that you can have like every day? Or
I think I know someone who's getting a patch.
Well, I'm curious. Well, I'm thinking about my mom, honestly, because she's got horrible, like she's supposed to have knee surgery. It's like bone on bone kind of. So she's got a lot of pain, but I don't think we're going to do the surgery because she's almost 90 and she just doesn't want to. So we've got to come up with some other options because she's in a lot of pain, especially in the wintertime when things are colder here. It seems like it affects her more, but that might be a really good option for her to have something more localized.
It's funny because Kirsten, my co-founder's mom, who we developed this product line for, we bring in the patches and then we package them up, and, post-manufacturing, they come into a different facility where they're packaged up. Before we package them in like our cute little packaging, we always pull off what she wants, so it doesn't go out in the cute little packaging. And, just, I don't know.
Yeah, why not?
So long story short is Kirsten the other day said, then we need to pull off 60 patches from my mom. And I go, 60? And she's like, yeah, Blondie, that's what she calls her mom. Blondie uses them twice a day on both, one on each knee.
Okay. It obviously helps her.
Oh, she is hilarious. She lives in a retirement community, and she is literally our number one sales rep.
There's a lot of aches and pains in those retirement communities, aren't there?
Yes.
I love it.
Her little apartment is like a revolving door of people for the basic Jane.
Oh, I love that.
So it's good to know that you make a product that people like, and we have a 65% reorder rate, which we're really proud of.
Well, yeah, it's got to make you feel good to know that you're helping people. It's like we're not talking recreational stuff. We're talking people really need some of these things. And, Big Pharma is taking a lot of control over people with these different painkillers and things like that. And this is a much more natural way for them to be able to avoid or alleviate some of that pain, I would think. So.
Especially localized.
Right.
Kirsten's mom, her big issue was she was taking a lot of ibuprofen and those kind of things, and it was hurting her kidneys. And so it is something that you can provide very like localized relief, which people like.
Yeah, gives them a little more control. And frankly, between Tylenol and ibuprofen, between your liver and your kidneys, you're in a lot of trouble if you've got consistent pain. You can't be taking that stuff all the time.
You are, and and that's one of the things that when we look at THC, I think THC at low levels is really also very medically helpful to people. And I say if it's the difference between being on something like Oxy and versus THC, I would lean towards the THC side, but that's just me.
Absolutely.
Hands down. Yeah. Hands down without question. I mean, you just see how much addiction and how much pain, like literally pain, it causes for families and people when people are addicted to that stuff. And it's so easy to get addicted to. But, if you get in a car accident and you hurt your back and there's, you've got tremendous pain, you got to live through your day. It's like, that's how that stuff happens, So
100%.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's a lot of really good people that have had to have experienced that or overdosed on some of those things. And so I'm so glad that there's other options that are out there for people, not just the recreational aspect of things. Of course, that's a whole nother side note, but just being able to help people with some of the pain and discomfort that they're feeling, like if they're going through a cancer treatment or they have some debilitating illness or something, it gives them a little bit of a lease on life,
100%. And the other thing about THC is I tell people all the time, it is very, very, very easy to feel like you are going to die if you consume too much THC. Like it is, you can get super paranoia and you will think you are dying.
I know somebody. Yeah. She just won't even, she just can't, she won't even try it anymore because that's what happens to her.
Inversely, it is very, very difficult to die of THC.
Right.
So contrary to alcohol, I tell people if you are consuming alcohol, it is very easy to die of alcohol, to consume too much and fall asleep and die and not know you're dying. Inversely, THC, you will consume a lot and you will be completely freaked out you are dying, but you cannot die of it. So it's an interesting compound that way when you look at like overdose and things. I think that people can, if they consume too many edibles or something, have an uncomfortable experience, but it's a safe compound as far as there aren't any
long-term negative benefits toward your body. But, so that kind of is something that you just made me think of when we're talking about like alcohol and, the legal limit, for example, on alcohol, and someone's swerving, they get pulled over, they do tests, whatever. How do they even test for people who may have consumed THC? There's not even a test or anything. It's just they go by a smell or something, right?
There's a blood test for THC. There's a group, I'm not sure if he's still a CEO, but Barbara Boxer from California's son used to be CEO of a company that was working on a breathalyzer test.
Okay.
People are working on it. The issue is the level of THC does not correspond as well to impairment. So it is a little bit, but Washington, it was something that we had to tackle when we legalized. That's one of the best things that happened in the state was a legal intoxication level. So I think as states come on, more research is going into that aspect of how do you legally test.
Right.
The one interesting thing about the difference, I tell people don't ever consume cannabis and drive.
Of course. But
the reality is if you do consume cannabis and drive, you generally are you're less aggressive, not more aggressive. Where in alcohol, you're generally more aggressive. That's where you see people speeding and hitting things at high speed and those kind of things, where cannabis, generally it's people slowing down and causing accidents because of that. So
that makes sense. Yeah, because I was thinking they do a blood test. It's like, you have THC in your system. If you stopped smoking it, you'd have it in your system for 30 days or something, depending on your fat content, right? Like what your body fat percentage is. So even if they tested you, you'd have it in your system, even if you hadn't smoked it for 2 or 3 weeks. That's why I was but maybe it's just at lower levels, you know? Maybe.
Yeah, there's subtle differences that they can test in the blood versus urine. Like you're going to pee it for a long time and it's going to be in your hair for a lot longer than it's going to be in your blood. But it is a concern, especially as, you know, people's tolerance increases, they may not experience the same level of impairment. And that, you know, driving, you just are really concerned about people being impaired.
Yes.
On the substance.
What would you say, Jessica, if there are any, some of the top challenges? I know you face challenges through research and legalization things, you know, already in the past. Do you see more challenges now and going forward? And if you do, what are some of those?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is as the market has grown, especially on the hemp side, is you've seen a number of people kind of doing creative chemistry and making different products. And some of those creative chemistry products, I just really caution people to stay away from. So I think that that's a challenge. Another challenge that we have in general is just the perception of it. I think
education.
And I think that there was a study done a while back that showed half of Americans think CBD can make you high. So when you step back and you really look at, people don't understand what the compounds are, and it's really complicated. And the war on drugs was really good. You know, it did a very good job of, this is a horrible substance and there are no
the gateway drug.
Should you consume it? Right?
The gateway drug. Yeah.
Although alcohol is the largest, nobody does anything until
That's
they
so
drink.
crazy.
I know.
Because
alcohol is so toxic, really. I mean, we aren't having anything to drink right at the moment, but I mean, we both obviously will drink here and there, but within moderation, and we're not getting drunk and driving or doing anything like that. But there's plenty of people that, I mean, you can do that when you're 21 years old legally, and they don't have any concept of how to maintain things or what their limits are or anything like that. And then it's available, you know, flat out. You can just go to the grocery store and get it. So I'm really glad we're seeing other options, you know, out there for people if that's what they choose to do. So
I would say the education, to your point, that probably I would see that as the number one challenge out there.
Well, and that's kind of, you know, like with this podcast, we were really interested in speaking with you because we're curious about it. I mean, we're in the middle of, you know, this state, which has obviously been pretty progressive on this topic. We both have children. Our children are seeing things from a different perspective. It's really, they're grown, obviously, but there's going to be another generation behind them. It's like, I want to be educated on what's out there and what it does and all of those things, so I can, you know, better educate other people too.
Well, and also for myself, because as I am heading into my 60s, it is just like 5 minutes from now. You know, being more educated and knowing what some of these options are, because I tend to be more, I would like to think that I err on the healthier side when it comes to, you know, food intake and different things like that. So, as well for my body, and
except the salt and vinegar chips,
and trying to
she always has those because she knows I won't eat them.
But yeah,
you know, so for your kids, what I would say is tell them to buy product from a regulated store. Like, don't buy THC on the internet or Delta 8 or any of these other things, because the stores have outlawed all of the synthetic stuff, which essentially, I tell people, it's like, if you go and buy alcohol at the grocery store now, you're not concerned about it being denatured and causing you to go blind or die. It's just, you know, it's regulated. And our stores are regulated natural Delta 9 THC from the plant. What you'll get in a convenience store or grocery store is bootleg. Most of it will totally be fine. But every once in a while, people are going to get the chemistry wrong. And so, you know, be careful about that. And, you know, it's a great plan. I mean, we really love researching it.
Well, the anxiety component that we were discussing earlier, that's huge, you know, with people. And I think there's this misnomer, this thought process out there that you have to have THC in order to be able to alleviate, you know, the anxiety that you're feeling. You really don't. You can just have, CBD products that are going to accomplish the same thing. So that's actually a really good takeaway for me. Definitely.
And if you guys have questions that pop up, send them my way. And Kirsten and I are always willing to kind of talk our circle up with people on this emerging market.
So with this emerging market, what if there's other people, entrepreneurs out there that are really curious and looking to join, the industry or be a part of it, is there any advice or suggestions that you have?
Yeah, I would say that it is an emerging market that's gone through like a lot of ups and downs in the last 10 years.
Okay.
And just to kind of really make sure that you do your diligence, check with other people in legal states. I think one of the biggest things that I see is when a new state comes on, it's a boom and then a bust.
Yeah.
And make sure that you kind of get in it and make sure your cost structures are sustainable for a commodity business. Because if you look at the state of Washington, it's a commodity business. You go and buy a bag of candy for $20 in the store. It used to be $50, $100.
The more there is, the less it's going to cost. That's for sure. I did have a question for you. I don't know if you would be able to answer this or not, but I was just recently in Texas, in Houston, almost said Houston, in Austin, Texas, which is a specific county that's a little bit more progressive there. And we just ran across, we weren't even looking. We just kind of were walking down the street in this crazy part. And we saw they had this, they had a store there. Like I can't remember the name of it. It's like a cannabis store. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Because it's like they could sell. They had it in vending machines there.
Okay, this is what's happened. Remember how I said that the federal government, the Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Department of Agriculture regulates hemp.
Yeah.
And when they set up this hemp legislation, they were concerned that certain states like Idaho would prevent trucks from being able to drive with hemp through their state. So what they did was they legalized everything from hemp. So once hemp, always legal. So what people are doing is they're taking the hemp plant and they're taking the CBD out of the hemp plant and they're converting it through chemistry into something called delta-8 THC. Okay. And this gets into this bootleg thing.
Interesting.
So essentially what they're saying is it started as hemp, so therefore it's legal.
Okay, yeah, because the guy was saying something about the way that they process it is federally legal, and so they can sell it there. I mean, this is in Texas, for God's sake.
It's just what Jessica said. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's like if you think about you can grow corn or wheat or potatoes or whatever, and it's legal until you turn it into vodka. Right. That processing step hasn't been worked out by the government yet. So they're essentially saying, since it started as hemp, it's always legal, which would be analogous to saying, since it started as potato vodka, it isn't regular.
They haven't quite caught up with that yet. I was really curious about it because I'd never heard that before. And they had products that were, they had edibles and they had, just like the normal stuff that it was out and it was on the street. And he said they send it in the mail and I was really surprised, but they had different strengths of these, the edibles is what he was explaining for people that have like PTSD or, they're going through chemo treatments or things like that, where these particular products were stronger. And the guy that had actually started this company was a vet, military vet who had been injured. I think that's how he kind of got into the whole idea of trying to come up with something. And this is what they came up with. So I was just really surprised when I heard him say that.
How I'd feel about, just like popping my quarters in a vending machine and see what
there was literally a vending machine. I was shocked.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, like in the state of Washington, we have such a progressive system as far as like the plant-based, like the high THC plants. Yeah. That we essentially have banned all that. That stuff is all illegal here. We have passed a state law last year on it. Okay. So a lot of the states that don't have any legal system have said, patients do need some access. In fact, Kentucky is a perfect example. So they have essentially set up a manufacturing process license for converting that, and it's legal there. And they do not have any marijuana system. They have no desire to set up a marijuana system. They're just growing hemp and regulating the conversion and sale.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how creative people can be to find their way around some of the the obstacles, that they face, because it's definitely a booming market, and it's a very lucrative market, not only for the government, but for the people who are selling it. So the whole issue with the banks not taking the money, it just doesn't even make any sense to me, because the banks are benefiting from the sale of these things, but they're making everything so difficult for the people, and frankly, kind of putting them in danger with the way they're making them process stuff. I just think it's, or their business, the way their business is. I mean, there's just a shooting at one of these places a few blocks away from where we live just a couple months ago. And it's just crazy to me that it's kind of like the Wild West a little bit, how they do it.
It's super crazy. And we're actually a super fortunate state, because we've had credit unions that will bank big businesses. So customers go and pay in cash, but there's a bank that takes that cash. There's a number of states out there that have no bank. So when you think about like paying taxes, somebody will show up with $1 million in quarterly taxes in cash.
I know, that's just crazy.
And they have to count it. And that was one of the biggest things that happened kind of early days, that we were able to convert from paying taxes that way to actually having bank account, which is just like insane when you think about, some of these stores doing a couple $1 million
a month.
And having it just like if there was no bank to take that, it'd just be like, I don't know.
Well, they're not going to bury it in their backyard
under their mattress at home.
So with Basic Jane, just going back to the your website, your company, it's all THC-free products. It's CBD related products, correct? And we will definitely put the link up with the episode, when we put that up. Do you do products that have THC in them then?
So we do in specific states. So there's specific states that will license out things in order, and then we manufacture within a regulated system.
Got it.
We do some of the more medical focused states.
Okay.
So Ohio, Pennsylvania, things like that. Here in Washington, Washington's a really recreationally focused market. So we've decided not to do anything here. People just, it's a little harder, but hopefully it's going to change a little bit for the patients with new laws coming up. And 10 years ago, as a medical patient in the state of Washington, you still were concerned you were going to be arrested. Today, patients aren't concerned, but some of the products and things fell off. So we gained some things and lost some things.
Yeah. Right. Well, at least there's still some options. But like you said, it's going to do nothing but progress. So we're probably going to see, more positive things in the future. Definitely. Look at that education you've had that you've put to work to create all of this. This is awesome.
I know. It's really amazing. As we wrap up here, Jessica, is there any specific final thoughts that you want to make sure to put out there?
No, I appreciate you ladies having me. And, I want to let people know that if they have questions, we have an info at Basic Jane on our website. Questions, we get kind of a lot of those along the way. And if there's, anything that we can do in the future, it's a pretty cool market, and it's emerging, and a lot of education needs to happen. So we're more than welcome to be that educational point.
I will venture a guess we're going to have several comments and questions. So we may be calling you to circle back on some of these.
For sure.
Yeah. And, provide a little bit more of your expertise and insight, because it's definitely a very interesting topic.
And I'm pretty sure for our listeners, as you know, we're on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. What I want to recommend, especially with this episode, I'm sure there's a lot of you that are going to want to download. We're on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all the regulars. So make sure and download this episode so that you can go back and get the information that you need. Probably going to put some things out there too, asking questions so you can research and find what the answers are throughout the episode, and we'll help you out with that. So you're going to want to make sure and download.
Thank you so much, Jessica. We are so happy to have you on. We really appreciate your time.
I really appreciate you ladies hosting me, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck with business. We're going to push that basicjane.com.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
I'll let you know how my mom likes the patches. Until next time, everybody.
All right, everybody.
Say goodbye. Have a good one. Bye, Jessica.
Bye.